Hello, my name is Gina Cizek, and I'm the Client Services Manager at 401k Advisors, Arizona. And as our name suggests, the focus of our firm is to try to help people save money for retirement. I think George Foreman has the right idea about retirement. We need to change our focus from at what age we want to retire, but look at what income we want to retire at. Without a disciplined approach to saving, insufficient income may require that we continue to work longer into retirement than we really want to, and that's not always an option. So my goal today is to help you understand that no matter your current age or financial situation, you need to begin setting aside some of your income for your retirement. We're going to review some basic information about retirement savings plans, about investment options in those plans as well. And thanks to some increased availability of target date funds and risk-based portfolios, you'll find you don't have to be an investment expert to be a successful saver. So let's begin our discussion with why saving for retirement is so important. This is a graph that shows the probability that if you get to age 65 today, you'll be living long into retirement. In this graph, the purple bar represents female life expectancy, gray is male life expectancy, and green is if you're one of a couple. And even when you get to out to age 85, 20 years into retirement, there's at least a 50% chance that you're going to be living. And hopefully you'll have saved up enough money so you can enjoy that retirement. Also notice now that we have recently added 100-year bars. And I think that you'll see those numbers are going to increase over the next several years. So what's the role of Social Security in retirement? I think a lot of young people have questioned this, and they're wondering if Social Security will be there for them. So Social Security is an important government program that provides a safety net and certainly provides a base level of income for people in retirement. But when you look at this number, in January 2016, the average Social Security benefit was just a little over $16,000 a year. I think you'll realize that while it's a helpful program, it probably isn't going to be sufficient to pay for your retirement. The other thing you need to think about is starting today. A lot of people like to postpone it. They have other priorities, which is understandable. But there's significant advantage to starting when you're young. And in this graph, we're looking at 3 different savers. The first saver is Susan. Susan starts working at 25, and she immediately begins to save in her 401k plan. She puts $5,000 a year in this plan, invested in a moderately aggressive portfolio to get about an 8% return. And she does that for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, she's put $50,000 in this account, but then she leaves her employer and she leaves the money behind. But she keeps this money, and it's compounding and growing over time, so that by the time she reaches retirement at age 65, she has an account balance of $850,000. Now, $50,000 she contributed, but that $800,000 is earnings that have accumulated over that long period of time. When we compare her to Bill, well, Bill started working when he was 25, but he didn't start saving in his retirement account until he was 35. Now at 35, Bill does the exact same thing as Susan. He puts $5,000 a year in his account. He invests it moderately aggressively, and he does that for the full 30 years that he's saving. So he puts $150,000 in his account. Unfortunately, when he gets to age 65, he still has not caught up to Susan. So he ends up at $161,000 compared to Susan's $850,000. And then if we look at Chris, well, Chris has done everything right. He started saving when he was 25. He consistently put that $5,000 a year in his account, put $200,000 in this account out of his own pocket, but that accumulated to $1.5 million over that long period of time. So there's 2 lessons here. The first is start early if you can. And second, if you didn't start early, you can't do the same thing at, for example, 35 that you did at 25. So at 35, to catch up, you'd have to put more money in than that $5,000. Bill probably should have started contributing $6,000 or $7,000 a year to get to the same place as Susan. So you have some options that are available to you that can get you on track for retirement. And the focus of this presentation today is on programs that are available to people that are self-employed. And you have several options available. One is an individual retirement account. Another is something called a SEP IRA. And the other is a solo 401k plan. So let's talk about IRAs to start, because that's the most familiar and probably easiest saving option available to you. And again, the focus here is assuming that you don't have an employer option at work. And so you're using an IRA or SEP or solo 401k instead. So you're able to put $5,500 each year into an IRA if you're under 50. Now, there's two types of IRAs. The ones we're most familiar with are the traditional IRAs. That has enabled us to save pre-tax money for retirement. So we get a little bit of a tax break today. It's to encourage us to save. However, when we take distributions from a traditional IRA, the entire amount is taxable. So the money that you contributed that was pre-tax and all the earnings that grow. Now, the rules of an IRA require that you keep the money in until you're at least 59 and a half. And then when you take the money out, it is going to be taxable. The thinking here is that when you're in retirement, you don't have other earned income, so you'll be in a lower income tax bracket than you were while you're working. So that's the tax advantage. Now, you do have to follow the rules. You have to be at least 59 and a half. And if you take the money out prior to 59 and a half, you are subject to tax and a 10% penalty on the entire balance, right? It's all pre-tax. So you are subject to tax and penalty on the entire amount. So really, when you set up an IRA, do that with the idea that this money is going to be preserved for retirement and not taken out earlier. Now, the other option in an IRA is something called a Roth IRA. It's a newer option. However, it can be attractive just depending on how you look at things. A Roth IRA allows you to save money after tax, so you get no tax break today. But when you take distributions, those distributions come out tax-free as long as you follow the rules. So if we go back to our illustration of Susan, where she put in $50,000, had that been a Roth and it was after tax, the $800,000 of earnings that she takes out later on are earnings she's never paid tax on. So if you can make the sacrifice of paying taxes today, this option might be of interest to you. Now, some of the same rules apply. You still have to be 59 and a half in order to take money out of your Roth. And if you do take money out prior to age 59 and a half, then you will pay on the earnings tax and penalty, but not on the money you put in. The money you put in, you already paid your taxes on, but earnings would be subject to tax and penalty. Another rule applies to a Roth, which is a little different. The account has to be in place for at least 5 years. So if you start this account at age 58, you'd have to wait the full 5 years, even though you'd be after age 59 and a half. So mind that rule as well. But you can see that if you can save this money and are willing to pay the taxes on it today, it could have some long-term potential advantages. Now, you can actually have both accounts. You can have some money that you put into a traditional IRA and get a tax break on, and other money you put into the Roth because you like that concept of tax-free money in retirement. However, the total amount each year that you put into an IRA can be no more than $5,500. So another option that's available to you is something called a solo 401k plan. Now, this is a lot like an employer-sponsored plan, except it's just for you as an individual. So the way these plans are structured, you cannot have any other employees unless that other employee is a spouse. So it's a solo 401k that allows you to make deferrals or to contribute some of your salary into this account up to $18,000, which is the same as an employer-sponsored plan, and there's a catch-up provision for those who are over 50. It also allows you to make a profit-sharing contribution, so you can add a profit-sharing on top of that $18,000. The maximum you can contribute, like a regular 401k plan, is $54,000 in 2017. The nice part about this plan is a solo 401k does not have the same tax filing and ERISA requirements that you see in larger employer-sponsored plans, so it's fairly easy to administer. And you may even have a loan available, and that's fairly unique when you're talking about an individual type of retirement savings account. Now, whether or not you have a loan available really depends on the service provider you use when you set up a solo 401k. So these are really appropriate options for people who want to save more than $5,500 a year. And so it's worth maybe a little bit more complication than you'd see in a regular IRA. And we also have something called a Simplified Employee Pension IRA, or commonly referred to as a SEP IRA, and these have been around for years as well. Now, one of the advantages of a SEP is you can have a SEP IRA even if you have other employees, although we see this most commonly with people that are self-employed and don't have employees. So the way a SEP works is you cannot make employee deferral contributions. Only employer contributions are made to a SEP. The maximum contribution for the year is 25% of your compensation, up to $54,000 a year. And the definition for compensation is net earnings from self-employment. So when you're self-employed, especially if you're a sole proprietor, you might need some help in getting a better understanding of what exactly is defined as compensation. But still, you can put a fair amount of money into a SEP IRA. If you have more than one employee, if it's you and others, you have to understand that that profit sharing contribution that you make to your account, you also have to make to employee accounts. So if you decide you're going to put 10% into your account, 10% of your compensation, then 10% of all of your employees' compensation has to be made as well as a contribution. Contributions are not required each year. It's a little bit like a profit sharing in that sense. Each participant can set up their own individual IRA account, so it's not a group account. And then be mindful of the fact that any contributions you make to other employees are immediately vested because they set up their own IRA. When the money is in their account, it's really their money. So again, a great option if you are solo, something you need to give some thought to if you have other employees. So how do you go about setting up an account for yourself? Well, you can do all of these accounts directly if you'd like. Usually either an IRA, solo 401k, or SEP can be set up working directly with a mutual fund family. A lot of times they have customer service people that can help you through the process, and usually they'll have a lot of information online. So if you're trying to figure out what kinds of mutual fund companies you can work with directly, just Google no-load mutual funds. Those are typically the kinds of mutual funds that will work with you directly. There are also some brokerage firms out there, I think what we used to refer to as discount brokerage firms, that will work directly with investors as well. If you really want to get some help with this, advisors can definitely help you set up IRAs, solo 401ks, or SEPs, and sometimes that getting some help will get you started a little bit faster. As far as fees go, again, it depends on whether you go direct, do it yourself, or whether you get an advisor to help you. Whenever you're using a mutual fund, no matter how you invest in that mutual funds always have sort of internal expenses. And then mutual fund families may also charge administrative charges. Usually on an IRA, they're pretty low. And so you would want to ask that customer service rep or read carefully to find out what other kinds of costs or base costs there might be for you to have your individual retirement account. Advisors will charge either a commission or a base fee, and they're really supposed to disclose that. So whenever you're working with an advisor, make sure you have a clear understanding of what their fees are, and then, of course, there's usually a product charge also. So you'd want to get all of that information up front so that you're making an informed decision. So once you have your account set up, and now you get to have some fun and pick the investments that are going to be in that account. Now, typically when we set up an employer-sponsored 401k plan, we're going to use mutual funds. They're a really common form of investing because they're fairly simple. So a mutual fund is really nothing more than a portfolio of stocks or bonds that is managed by a professional money manager. So you may pick the overall strategy, large cap growth or small cap value, but once you pick the asset class that you want to be in, you really have a professional manager managing your account. Now, some mutual funds are stock mutual funds, and stock mutual funds represent ownership in companies. So I have some logos, you might recognize some of those, but truly you're a partial owner of all the companies that make up that portfolio. Now that means you have the reward of when that company is successful, because the stock price should go up to reflect that success. However, if a company has some issues or problems, or there's a negative story in the news, you might see that the value of that stock change and go negative. And also, as we go through economic cycles, You can see that obviously a company's revenue might be affected during a recession and the value of that stock might go down. So understand that you have greater long-term potential return from a stock mutual fund, but not without volatility and not without risk. So it's important, if we're going to have some stock mutual funds in our retirement strategy, we might want to balance that out with a bond mutual fund as well. So a bond is a little bit more like a loan. So you're either loaning money to a company, loaning money to the government in the form of treasuries, or even loaning money so people can have mortgages. But there's always an asset behind that bond, and that bond is going to pay interest income for the length of that bond. So you can maybe buy a bond for 5 or 10 years, and during that period of time, you'll have the interest from that bond. At the end of that period of time, the bond matures, you get your money back. So it is considered a safer investor. Generally speaking, the interest rates are going to be much more moderate, so your return is going to be lower, but you should also see lower volatility, especially if you're in a high-quality bond fund. And then we also usually have stable value or money market funds, which are low risk, generate a little bit of interest return. They're a good place to put money as you approach retirement, or if you want a little more stability in your portfolio, but not really a great place if you're trying to grow money longer term, especially in this very low interest rate environment. So I mentioned earlier that there are some easy options now available to you as an investor. And one option we see commonly in, again, employer-sponsored plan is a target date fund. And target date funds are available through directly to you through mutual fund families as well. So the concept is a target date fund creates a full portfolio for you of stocks and bonds, and it adjusts the exposure to stocks and bonds based on your length of time to retirement. So if you look to the left of this graph, you're really representing a period 40 years out from retirement. And the various green and gray sections of the slide are representing various parts of the stock market. The blues represent bonds. And you can see when you're really far from retirement, your portfolio is definitely overweighted towards stock to give you maximum growth. And you still have a little bit of bonds exposure to create some stability. But you'll notice that it begins to glide down the closer you get to retirement. So 0 represents your retirement year, and you can see we're looking at a portfolio that's anywhere from 35 to 45% exposed to stock, and then the difference is going to be a bond portfolio. So we certainly don't want to have the same risk at age 65 that we might have had at 25 or 30. So this portfolio makes those changes for you accordingly. Now there's a variety of different target date providers out there, and you'll see the glide path changes and the underlying investments change a little bit. But this is the concept, and again, it creates a very easy investment option for you. Some mutual fund families also offer what we call risk-based portfolios. So they might have a portfolio that's conservative or moderate aggressive. But again, once you pick the risk tolerance that you want, it creates a full portfolio that is in line with that risk level. So those are some easy options to look for. When you set up your own individual retirement account, you also are in control of the underlying investments, unlike an employer-sponsored plan. So if you wanted to just use mutual funds directly or even stock, you have the ability to do that. If you are going to create your own portfolio using different mutual funds, we would normally suggest that you would have a representation of a number of different asset classes. So on the more aggressive stock side, maybe some international, small, mid, and large company stocks. And then on the more conservative side, a little bit of stable value or money market and some different bond or fixed income type funds in there. So if you wanted to create a more aggressive portfolio, you would have an overweight to stock, and a more moderate portfolio, you would overweight the fixed income and money market. So the question is, how much money then is enough as we're trying to figure out what we need for retirement? It's very difficult to say, especially when retirement is a long way away. So in the financial services industry, we come up with some we call rules of thumb, some guidelines that'll at least help you have an idea of what you might need. So if we look at the pre-retirement income, that would be your income right now. So if you were making currently $75,000 a year, we would say in retirement you would need to have at least about 80% of that to live on. So that's how we get $60,000 times the number of years in retirement, and here they chose 20 years of retirement to get to the total you would need for that comfortable retirement of $1.2 million. And I know these numbers are daunting. So when people are just starting out, we encourage you to start anywhere that you're comfortable, just to begin the process. So that might be 2 or 3%. Another rule of thumb, though, is that you'd want to get to at least 10% of savings in order to achieve a comfortable retirement. So not easy to start there, but that is a goal you should keep in mind. So just a couple of additional thoughts as you're trying to figure out the best approach for you to get started. Depending on your experience, getting professional help from an accountant or an advisor may be really helpful. Having realistic expectations is also very important. We've been in a 9-year bull market cycle, so we've had some very positive returns from the stock market, but realize that the market will go through corrections. You will see periods when you get a negative return in your portfolio. In fact, the average return for the S&P 500 over the past 20 years has been a little under 8%, and I would tend to say that's a fairly realistic expectation, as opposed to some of those great double-digit returns we see occasionally from year to year. And realize that it takes time. I gave you some sort of daunting numbers on the slide just before this, but you can actually achieve these goals if you are a disciplined long-term investor. So I thank you so much for your time, and I hope you found this information helpful.